A portion of this video is sponsored by Dropbox. More about them later. Why do people spend outrageous sums of money on solid copper cookware? Well, one obvious answer is beautiful. I mean, look how pretty this stuff is. But copper does have some particular physical and chemical properties here in the kitchen. Indeed, you may own some copper cookware without even realizing it. Lots of stainless steel cookware has layers of copper sandwiched inside it, because copper is an incredible heat conductor. But pure, solid copper has some other properties that make it great for certain things and potentially dangerous for others. Yes, we're going to talk about the whole Moscow Mule copper poisoning thing. But first, let's talk about eggs. In classical European cooking, a copper bowl is the traditional choice for beating egg whites. And I'm not talking about copper bowls that are lined on the inside with something chemically inert, like tin or stainless steel. I'm talking raw dog copper. Copper is very chemically reactive, and that's actually what we want here. It's funny, the earliest scientific literature on this topic was co-authored by Harold McGee, who wrote this book you may have heard of. Anyway, when you beat egg whites, you're basically trying to bash open the egg proteins and tangle them up with other egg proteins in a web that traps water and air bubbles. If you bash them too much, the proteins tighten up, squeeze out all the water and air, and everything collapses. If you do this with copper bowls and/or copper utensils, some copper ions come loose, and they form complexes with an egg protein called ovotransferrin or conalbumin. According to McGee et al., these complexes are less reactive to temperature, and that makes the foam more stable during beating and cooking. There's other research indicating that copper ions might bond with the sulfur groups on the egg proteins, and they'd essentially get in the way and keep the proteins from forming disulfide bonds with each other. Those super strong disulfide bonds that would otherwise form between the proteins may essentially make the foam brittle, more likely to break, but the science seems a little hazier on those specifics. This paper is in the description if you want to read more. Here, I'm using a power tool just to standardize my experiment. One electric beater on high in a copper bowl. I get to a pretty stiff peak in 90 seconds. Beautiful. I'll save that for a sec. I'll repeat the experiment in a stainless steel bowl. And after 90 seconds, we don't have peaks yet. I have to go another 30 seconds to get a peak. And also, check it. Copper ion foam is on the right. After a half hour, it's leaking a little water, but the foam we whipped in steel is leaking a ton of water. This foam is less stable. Now, I'm not telling you to go buy a copper bowl. You can get a similar effect by just putting a pinch of cream of tartar or a squeeze of lemon juice in with your egg whites. I'm just here to explain why, historically, people used copper for this. Copper's affinity for sulfur is also one reason why people distill alcohol in copper vessels, as we saw in the video we did a few weeks ago at this distillery in Indiana. It's pretty handy that I still have that footage to show you, and I'll never lose it, thanks to Dropbox Backup, the sponsor of this portion of my video. You don't have to be a YouTuber like me to know that video takes up an enormous amount of space. That entire distillery shoot is just sitting here on this precarious little external hard drive. If I lose this, I lose all the work. Imagine if you lost all of your videos, your photos, your crucial documents. That's why I've got Dropbox Backup, which is a simple way to secure all of your stuff automatically. You just tell Dropbox which of your devices you want to protect. If my 5-year-old dropped this hard drive in the toilet or something, I'll just be able to download all my videos back again thanks to Dropbox Backup. Check out my link in the description to choose your backup solution and start backing up your most important files and irreplaceable memories today. Thanks to Dropbox for sponsoring that portion of my video. Anyway, back at the distillery, we saw this traditional pot still, copper. Here's a more modern column still, a more sophisticated machine, but still made of copper. I talked to Justin Huey, the head distiller at Cardinal Spirits there, and I asked him, why copper?
So copper will pull sulfur out of the distillate when the distillate is in vapor form on it. That's more beneficial when you're running brandies usually.
Brandy, of course, is liquor that is extracted from wine. You get the wine hot to the point where the alcohol starts to vaporize, but most of the water stays behind. The alcohol is your distillate. It rises up into that copper column where you can collect it and condense it into brandy. Problem is, wine also has a fair bit of sulfur in it too. Some of those sulfur compounds are going to go up with the alcohol and they're going to end up in your brandy. You don't really taste them in the wine, but you'd taste them in the brandy.
Yeah, sulfur's rotten eggs. No one likes rotten eggs. And because of the pH of a spirit, really low amounts of sulfur will come through and you'll be able to taste it.
So you make at least part of your still out of copper. Copper bonds with some of the sulfur in the distillate. It pulls the sulfur out. Of course, the first people building copper stills didn't know that. They just knew that copper is really good at conducting heat and it's really easy to work. When it comes to metals and people, copper is where it all began. Copper is probably the first metal used by humans. It often occurs in the earth in its pure elemental form, like this. Iron you have to smelt out of ore. This copper came straight from the ground. And you don't have to get copper super hot in order to work it. In fact, you can work it cold. Back in the day, people would use a hammer to just form out shapes like this. These little dots were probably made by a machine to remind you of those days, but that's what they're reminding you of. People used to be able to do this with a hammer because copper is super malleable, as indicated by the fact that I can crush this with my bare hands. Copper is also very ductile, which means you can draw it into a thin wire, like a whisk. Warning, do not contact with the acidic food. Awkward wording, but good advice. Common food acids will actually leach copper out of the cookware and into your food. A little bit of copper is actually an essential micronutrient in our diets. We have to eat a little. But copper is acutely toxic in huge doses and chronically toxic in smaller but still excessive doses over time. Nausea and vomiting, anemia, liver and kidney diseases, lots of bad things are possible with too much copper. This is why the Moscow Mule is an actual public health concern. It's not actually from Moscow, but it is a very popular acidic cocktail traditionally served in a copper mug. In 2017, the US state of Iowa made headlines by banning copper mugs in bars. Well, actually, they said you could use them, but you could only use the ones that are lined with something inert on the inside, something non-reactive, like tin or stainless. Were the Hawkeyes being overly cautious? No, not according to this brand new study in the journal Environmental Health. It was co-authored by undergraduate students at Carroll College in Montana. Pretty cool. Anyway, their experiments showed that a standard mule absolutely can extract dangerous levels of copper from a mug. Weirdly, the ginger beer component is the big culprit, not the lime juice. The horizontal axis, though, is minutes, and you can see that it takes a long time for the drink to leach out a lot of copper. So, on the occasion that I drink a mule from an unlined copper mug, I try to drink it quickly, which isn't hard to do because they're super delicious. Also because the drink is supposed to be super cold. You wouldn't want to let it sit around and warm up. Indeed, some people say the reason you make a mule in a copper cup is to keep it cold. Copper is far more thermally conductive than basically anything except diamond and silver. Thing is, thermal conductivity is a double-edged sword. Yeah, if you put this into the freezer, it's going to chill down really fast, but once you take it out, it's going to conduct heat from the room into your drink really fast and warm up your drink. I'll prove it. Copper mug, ceramic mug. I'll make an identical mule in each. A quarter cup of vodka, half a cup of ginger beer, tablespoon of fresh lime juice. Half a cup of traditional crushed ice into each. Stir, and both drinks are 41, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 5 degrees Celsius. Now let's wait 20 minutes, which you really shouldn't do because of the whole copper leaching thing. But anyway, the drink in the copper cup has shot up to 47 degrees Fahrenheit, more than 8 degrees C. The one in the ceramic is down to 39 Fahrenheit, less than 4 degrees C. What gives? Well, the ice melted, which cooled down the liquid phase of the drink, which is what we're taking the temperature of. Same thing happened in the copper mug, it's just that after it happened, tons of heat from the room started transmitting through this copper into the drink, and it warmed up the drink. Ceramic, in contrast, is a terrible conductor of heat. Another way of saying that is it's a great insulator. It kept the Mule colder than the copper. And yet there's something weird. The Mule in the copper cup feels colder to me, even though it's not. This drink feels colder. The copper is a much better heat conductor, so it lost its heat to the cold drink inside really fast. And as a result, the cup itself feels really, really cold when I have the drink in there. And I felt that cold on my lips when I took the drink. And I liked that. I think the coldness of the vessel affects our total experience of the drink. Plus, I taste the copper, and the copper seems to enhance the taste of the drink. Fun fact, scientists don't really know what the metallic taste is. They don't know if it's like a distinct taste modality, like sweetness or something, or if it's some kind of multisensory experience that's maybe electrical in nature. Here's a 2009 paper where they found that copper interacts with proteins naturally present in your saliva. This could have the effect of enhancing the astringency of the drink, which is nice if you're into such things, and I am. But yeah, not great for one's health to put acidic things into contact with copper for a really, really long time and then eat them. This is why traditionally copper pans are lined on the inside. Originally they were lined with tin, now more often they're lined with stainless steel. This has no lining in it though. Why? Because this is a jam pan. Pure copper pots are still commonly used for making sweets. If there's a lot of sugar in your solution, that seems to keep copper from leaching for reasons that I still don't really understand, but the French have been making jam in pure copper pots for centuries. People say the key to jam is to cook it really fast before you drive off all of the volatile, fruity smells. And because this is really thermally conductive, it'll get hot really fast. You can cook your jam really fast, get it up to its temperature really fast before you drive off all the fruity flavors. I have no idea if that's actually true, but it's something that people say, and it seems like it could be true. People use these for sugar work in general. Copper heats very evenly, so you don't get hot spots in your syrup that could burn or seize. Plus, again, copper just heats super fast, and you need a lot of heat for candy making. The side of this pot is so hot, and the handle, yikes! This has been on the stove for like 3 minutes, and I have to use a mitt to hold that handle. Copper is 25 times more thermally conductive than stainless steel. Aluminum comes closer, and aluminum is a lot cheaper, but copper is still almost twice as thermally conductive as aluminum, and it can get the job done with a thinner layer. This is why very high-quality stainless steel cookware is generally a copper sandwich. The only metal more thermally conductive than copper is silver. And if you think copper is expensive, try silver. That said, there are people who make solid silver pans for an enormous amount of money. Should we buy one? Should we try it out? Should that be a future video?